Okay, so good morning. Today we are on Ketubot Daf Tzadik Gimel, and we are up to the Mishnah on the top of the page, about 6 lines down. But before we get to that, let me first share my screen. Before we get to that, at the end of the day yesterday, James asked an excellent question, which is, what in the world does that humongous Tosfos say on the bottom of Tzadik Bedam Bet? And so I thought I would just give a quick overview of that. The main question that the Gemara said yesterday, that if Ruvain sold a field to Shimon, hey Mark, if Ruvain sold a field to Shimon, so I'm answering your question, James. So, we said yesterday that if Ruvain sold a field to Shimon with a guarantee, and potentially even without a guarantee, Ruvain had the legal right to intervene in the litigation to defend Shimon. If Yaakov, for example, were to attempt to collect from the field from Shimon based on a loan that Yaakov made to Ruvain. So Yaakov lent money to Ruvain, and then and now Ruvain sold his one field to Shimon. So Yaakov goes to Shimon and says, listen, I have a lien on that field. Before you bought that field, I had lent money with a written contract I had lent money to Ruvain. And so as a result, that is why he is entitled, I'm entitled to the field. So Tosfos wants to know, what is the practical difference that it makes whether Ruvain has a right to participate in the litigation? For example, his initial proposal is, well, maybe it affects who the witnesses could be. But Tosfos rejects that, noting the fact that, if the witnesses are relatives of anybody, Ruvain, Shimon, or Yaakov, that's going to still be a problem, because that their relative has skin in the game, so to speak, and so as a result, that's going to be a problem. So that can't be it. And so even if Ruvain doesn't necessarily intervene, it's still an issue for him to, for any of his relatives to testify. So it's not going to be the witnesses. So then he says that maybe it is the oath that's involved. And so in particular, however, the problem with that is that if a creditor comes to collect from a purchaser of real estate, a creditor of the seller comes to collect from the purchaser of real estate, there is an oath that already is obligated to be made, meaning the purchaser, in this case Shimon, has the right to force Yaakov to make an oath that he has not already been paid off. Otherwise, we'd be worried, right, that Ruvain and Yaakov could set up a great scam, because what will I do? So let's say I lent money to Mark, and Mark and I want to pull a nice prank on James. So what will happen? So Mark will sell his land to James after I made the loan.
How much?
Yeah, $100 worth of land, and then you'll have already paid me off. But you'll say, David, you know what? Keep the contract that says I owe you money, and go and get the field back from James. And so I then take the contract where I lent Mark money, and I go to James and I say, okay, James, sorry, Charlie, Mark doesn't have any more money, so I'm going to take the field from you. So in order to prevent that kind of deception, James has the right to have forced me to swear that I wasn't already paid this loan. Okay, so in that context, however, Tosfos then notes that we can actually say that here's the story. When is it that let's say that, James and Mark have a very close relationship. And so James has told Mark that James and I have, a very close relationship. And so as a result, James has told me that I will never make you swear. I trust you completely, and I will never make you swear. And so as a result, when I now come to collect from James, James doesn't have the ability to make me swear because he's made a promise never to make me swear. But Mark has not been made that promise. And so as a result, if Mark intervenes, Mark has the ability to force James to swear. So that's the kind of situation that we're talking about according to Tosfos. Tosfos then deals with other related questions of allegations of fraud and things of that sort. And so that's why it's a very long Tosfos. But in any event, that's the main thing that is relevant for our discussion here. Okay, so in particular, Reuven can also claim that the contract is counterfeit and force an oath. Again, if Yaakov can't bring witnesses, but Shimon lacks that ability. So that's the reason that he brings up the whole question of counterfeits. That there's a difference between Shimon, the purchaser, who when you are approached with a contract that you are not a party to, you do not have the right to force an oath based on an allegation of fraud. Only if you have witnesses, or only if the named party in the contract has that right to claim fraud and say, listen, I know I never signed this, and so as a result, I can claim fraud, and then the contract is a fraud, and as a result, if you bring witnesses, if you bring with the witnesses that saw me sign it, so then I'm stuck because you have two witnesses. But without the witnesses, then the holder of that contract can swear and then still collect. So that's a unique feature that relates only to the creditor, only to the debtor, and not to the purchaser of real estate. So that's what that Tosfos was about. And so now, though, we turn back. What? Yes, it still seems work. Well, again, a lot of that Tosfos relates to the question of who can allege fraud, and other Gemaras that discuss that topic. So, okay. So now we get to the Mishnah, and this is going to be fun because as Andy Small circulated yesterday, there is a very nice paper by Professor Omam, who from Israel, the Nobel Prize winning economist, who analyzed this Mishnah and came up with a cool explanation for the numbers in the Mishnah that is not explained in the Gemara, because we're going to have 3 cases in our Mishnah. Then our Gemara is going to wonder what's this talking about, and we're going to be able to explain it. So that'll be neat. So all right, let's take a look. So Misha Hayanasir l'shalosh nashim. You have a guy who's married 3 wives, umes, and now he died. Ksubasa shel zo mana. The first one is owed 100 zuz, which is a mana. Vishel zo masayim. This second one is owed 2 mana. So as a result, that's 200. Vishel zo shalosh meos, and the other one has 300. Ve'ein sham ella mana. But all there is 100. Cholkim b'shaveh. Everybody gets the same amount. So Rashi notes, Shalashta nechtamu biyom echad, the first Rashi in the Mishnah, that all 3 of these were signed on the same day, because as we will see at the end of today, I believe that we'll get to the Mishnah that either will conclude with or that will stop just before. The Mishnah at the end of today will note that ordinarily priority is based on whose ksuba is first. So it must be that all these 3 ksubas are signed on the same day. Shalosh tan nechtamu b'yom echad. They were all signed on the same day. D'i b'tulasa yomei hakodemes bishtar kodemis begiboy, right? Because if they were on 3 different days, the earlier one is going to be signed. We'll see that even if you sign multiple ones on the same day, if you write the time in the on the contract, then you go by the priority of the time. But if you don't write the time, if you don't have additional details, if they're tied based on the face of the contract, we don't then ask, okay, well, which one of you actually signed first? Rather, we say that all 3 have equal rights. And one can understand why, because effectively you could have written into the contract something different. So the fact that you chose not to and you had them all labeled the same way means implies a desire for equal rights. So kolkos b'shava, so they split it equally. Shaharei koach shloshtan shava b'shibud mana de bekula ikamana. That all 3 of them have a claim to that first 100, right? The one who claims 100 has a claim to that 100. The one that has 200 has a claim to that 100, and the one that has 300 has a claim to that 100. So what happens to the 100? It gets split 3 ways. Okay. All right. So that's the first case. Now the second case, hayusham masayim. What happens if there's 200? Shalmana notelas chamishim. The one who only had a claim of 100, that person, she gets 50. V'shel matayim, v'shel shalosh meot, shlosha shel zahav. They each get 3 gold dinars, which is worth 75. So again, so let's, I'm going to start writing this up. So this is, so we have case number 1. Okay, and then we have A, B, and C, and A has a 100. This is the amount in their ksuba. Okay, and so everyone gets 33 1/3. Okay. All right, now case number 2. So case number 1 is there's 100 total. Okay, now case number 2. 200 total. And we're going to say 50, 75, 75. Okay. And let's take a look and see what case number 3 says. Hayusham shlosh meos, if there's 300, shalmana no telas chamishin, the first one still gets 50, so she doesn't get anything extra. V'shel masayim mana, the second one gets 100. V'shel shalosh meos, shisha shel zahav. She gets 6 gold dinars, which is worth 75, which is worth 150. So let's write that all down so that we have case number 3. $50, 100, and 150. Okay, so the issue is that why is it that when you go from case number 1 to case number 2, woman number 1 gets something, and case number 2 to case number 3, she gets nothing? And why is it that that these 2 end up with the same amount in case number 2, but they end up with different amounts in case number 3? So, you know, what's going on here that everybody seems to gain in case number 2 and not in case number, and not in case number 3. And so, you know, now case number 3 in and of itself makes a ton of sense, right? Because if I were to just tell you what should the division be, it makes a total sense that the ratio of 100, 200, 300 should be how the money gets divided: 50, 100, and 150. Indeed, one could have said that should have been the way we divide even in case number 1. So that is what's going to go on in the Gemara, is trying to understand how it is. Now I'll write one more thing on the board. That this is what they think is going on. That what they assume is that A B and C,
Wow.
right? A, B, and C, divide first 100. Okay, and then B and C divide second 100, and the C gets third 100. That is the logic that they're assuming as an underlying.
But then
So
B wouldn't go up in case 3.
yeah, I know, 100%. Well, not only that, but A shouldn't go up in case number 2, right? If we were to follow this rule strictly, right, then this should have been 33 and a third, and then these are 83
Ooh, that's so much.
and a third.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, and then this should be still 33 and a third. Right, this should be 83 and a third.
Ooh, that's no.
And 183 and a third.
Forget it.
Okay, and so the question is, why didn't we get this, and why didn't we get this? Okay, and what Professor Oman is going to do, we'll see in a few minutes, that is he's going to explain how we ended up with these numbers in a way that's much simpler than what the Gemara is going to offer. So this is
200. The first one.
Yes, this is 200, and this is 100 total, and this is 300 total. Right? Absolutely, good math.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Okay, all right. So now that we've done this, so then the Gemara, the Mishnah, concludes. If you have 3 people who put money in a pot, right? Meaning the understanding that we're going to do right now is the simplest, is that they're investing in an investment. If 3 people invest in an investment, poch pichasu ohosiru kach hein chokim, they're going to divide along these lines. Okay, that is the rule. Okay, so now, and we're now, by the way, if this all upsets you, don't worry, we have a different viewpoint that we'll see.
That doesn't seem fair at all.
Yes, because correct, it doesn't seem very fair at all for investment. So 100%, exactly. So now we're now picking up with the Gemara on Side Gimel Amud Aleph, and the Gemara asks the question that we highlighted in our review, that it doesn't match. Shalmana notelas chamishin. How come the one in the second case, the person who the wife A only actually gets a whole 50. Tlasun utlas v'tilsa hu de isla. She should have gotten 33 and a third. So as a result, we're confused. Why is it? Okay, so Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel explains, because sebes balas ma'asayim levalas maneh dinu dvarim ainli imach b'mana. So the key is that wife number 2 here tells wife number 1, I am not going to participate in the first 100. So we're going to take out B from this first 100. And so from this first 100, A gets 50. Whoops, that's 50. A gets 50 and C gets 50. Okay, so that's all right. And then, okay, so now, all right, so we've explained that. And so that's how we get A to having 50. And then somehow we're going to end up with the 275s. Well, how do you get the 275s? Well, that's going to be the next question. So, Ihaki ema seifa shal ma'asayim v'shel shalosh meos shalosh shel zahab. But 1 second, how do you end up with the last 2 getting 75? If B and C are dividing the second 100, so then B should end up with 50, and just like A, yeah. And C should have 100. 50 from the first 100 and 100 and 50 from the second 100, which totals 100. So it should be 50, 50, 100. So why is that not the case. So Tamala, right? So the point is right? So Tamala ha salakta nafshak mina, right? Because after all, the second one should say you backed out of the first 100, so you should only get 50. So mishum de amrullah, no, the woman, wife B will say to wife C that this is what I mean. Mishum de amrullah medinu dvarim hu de salike nafshai. I only got myself out of the argument with A, but with you, I won't let you take the 50. I'm going to argue this part of the 50. I want to split with you. So as a result, it should be B with 25 and C with 25. So the Gemara, the Rishonim all wonder how could we do this? And the basically answer is that it must be that C agreed to it. So in any event, so that now we've explained how it is that everybody ends up with 20 with their numbers. The 50 comes because wife A, basically exactly. So wife A gets half of the first 100. The other half of the first 100 is split between the two of them, and then the two of them also split the second 100, and so that's how you end up with 75 and 75.
Okay. How could that be the type case?
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. And that this is the beauty of Professor Aman's answer that we'll get after we go through the initial Gemara and the initial explanations. So Hayusham, so now we deal with case 3. So that was the explanation for case number 2. And again, this is the explanation of Shmuel. Okay, so we're going to have a second answer in a moment. So Hayusham Shalosh Me'os. So now we have 300. V'shal Masayim Mana. So we said the second one gets 100, right? But Shivim B'Kamishahu, they shouldn't get 100. They should end up with 75. Assuming that that Shmuel was right about this piece. Now that you just add 100, all of that additional 100 should go to wife number 3 and wife C, because these 3 already divided the first 200. The third 100, there's no claim. A and B have no claim to the third 100 because their Ketubot are both only 200 or less. So the third 100 they have no claim to. So shouldn't that third 100, shouldn't these numbers be 50, 75, and 175? And so the Gemara answers, Amar Shmuel, B'koseves balas shalosh meos lebalas ma'asayim luvalas mana. No, it's where the third wife C says, I'm not interested in the first 100. So now, instead of eliminating the wife B, now we're going to eliminate C. And so, right, so we have A, B, and C. So now we're going to eliminate C. So now we have A and B getting each getting 50. A and B each getting 50. I hope that that can be seen. And then and now B and C divide the second 100. So that gets, now B is up to 100. B is now at 100 and C is at 50. And now C gets the third 100, so C is now at 150. And so that is how Shmuel explains these numbers. Okay, I'm going to hopefully that is all visible on the screen. I have it on. Let me show on the screen here as well. Okay.
The second one.
C takes herself out of the first 100. No, A never gets into the second 100 because A's claim is only.
She takes herself into the second.
No, she's taking herself out of the first 100. We're changing when Shmuel's basically.
One doesn't work.
What?
One doesn't work.
No, this is special for case 3. Special for case 3, right? So it's case 1, nobody takes themselves out. Case 2, B took herself out of the first 100, and in case C, C took her, in case 3. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly the problem with this, and that's why, again, Professor Oman's answer is going to be so beautiful. All right, so that is.
Why did Shmuel even think like?
Yes.
Case 1, that explains it.
Because how else do you explain these numbers? The problem is that they didn't come up with a good explanation for these numbers. I know, I understand that. Apparently, my guess is that the explanation got lost, and that it really wasn't until Professor Oman came up with it. But it seems clear that his explanation was the original intention.
For Professor Oman, if this case happened, we would just go by case 1 unless people made other arrangements. Yes,
basically, we would go by case 1 unless people made other arrangements. And we will see that the Gemara is going to pick up on this kind of approach. And then this is again according to Shmuel. Now, Rav Yaakov Minar Code, Mishmei de Ravina Amar. Reisha b'shtei tvisus v'seifa b'shtei tvisus. So again, now we're calling this the Reisha, but these two cases involve two separate chunks, two separate grabbings of assets. So how do we work that out? Reisha b'shtei tvisos denaflu shivin v'chamisha. The first claim was 75 b'chad zimna. So what happened? So let's take a look. So this is all Shmuel. Okay, so I'm gonna just Shmuel. Okay, and now this is Rav Yaakov. Okay, and so Rav Yaakov says we had first in the first case, this is 75, and so A gets 25, B gets 25, and C gets 25. Okay, right? And so now, and then part 2, we next have 125. Okay, now everybody has gotten 25. So now when we come to the second 125, only A is still owed 75. So as a result, A, B, and C divide first 75 equally. Right? So that means A gets another 25.
100.
B gets 25.
That's 50.
C gets 25.
75.
Exactly. Okay, so now how much does A have total? A has 50 at the moment, 25 and 25. B has 50, and C has 50. But don't forget, out of this 125, that we've just only dealt with the first 125 of the first 75 of it. So now B and C, clear B and C divide the last 50. So B gets 25 and C gets 25. And so now B ends up with 75 and C ends up with 75. Okay, so we've basically made two tfisot, and now we've ended up with the right numbers. Okay, so that's explanation for item number 2.
One of 150.
What
happens to the others? You say it's 150.
Well, which is 150? I'm sorry.
You said 75, 75.
Yeah. So these B gets 75 and C gets 75.
What happens to the other 150?
Oh, A gets 50. A gets 50. We only have 200. We only have 200 in this case. We're going to do the 300 case right now.
Oh.
Excellent question. Okay, so now and Seifa b'shtei tfisot. And again, the second case will also involve 2. Denaflu shivim v'chamisha b'chad zimna. Right, where again we have the first one is 75. So here, now we have case number 2, and A is 75, so it ends up the same way, and B is 225. Okay, so through the first 75, right? So we have 50, 25, 25, 25, right? So 25, 25, 25, and then this 225 gets broken into 75, and then 100 and 50. So the 75 gets 25, 25, 25. The 100 goes 50, 50. And the last 50 goes only to C, because the last 50, wife B has no claim to, because it's beyond 200, right? Because she already has 25, so she only has a claim on the next 175. So as a result, we end up with 150, 100, and 50. And so that ends up being a perfect match to our Mishnah.
So you explained the second 75 is that's how that number was reached, because that's how much A was still owed.
Exactly.
How do we break up the last 150?
Well, this is how much A was still owed.
Mm-hmm.
This is how much A and the B and C were still owed. And this is only C was owed. Well, take a look. How much was B? It had gotten was owed 200, but now at this point, after having gotten the first 25, B is only owed 175.
Okay.
So as a result, B's claim is limited to this tranche, and so this only C gets. Okay, so that is again a brilliant explanation. Not too likely that that's what the Mishnah is really talking about.
At least it's logical, and you can apply it to other cases.
100%. But and what it's really saying is that we should have ended up in this scenario, right? These are the right numbers, is basically what both of these are saying, right? Both approaches are saying if there had been only one grabbing,
Mm-hmm.
we should end up with 33 1/3, 83 1/3, and 83 1/3 in case number 2. And in case number 3, we should end up with 33 1/3, 83 1/3, and 183 1/3. Okay, that is how both Shmuel and Rav Yaakov would both say if you had all one tfisa and no agreements. Okay, and now I'm going to put down here. So now we're ready for Professor Oman. Okay, so Professor Oman says the following. He says that the mistake that essentially Shmuel and Rav Yaakov are making is that you're focusing on all 3 people. Instead of focusing on all 3 people at the same time, let's focus on just 2 people. And if we focus just on every pair of AB, AC, and BC, then we end up with these numbers. So let's do that. So let's focus on these 2 people. Okay, so how much do they have in total? They both get together, they are getting 125. Well, A only has a claim to the first 100. So how much does A get? A gets 50, because it's half of the first 100. And how much does B get? B gets half of the first 100, but then all of the remaining 25. So B gets 75.
Basically, Shmuel's second.
What?
Shmuel's second.
Right. Well, Shmuel. The issue is that
Rav Yaakov's second.
No, because I mean Shmuel's because Rav Yaakov's 2 answers are both assume that there are 2 grabbings of assets. That you do 2 calculations. You do a calculation. You do there was an initial grabbing of 75, and then a second grabbing of 125. And so as a result, it's only when you have two grabbings. But here, what we're doing is instead we're focusing on pairs of people. It's all one grabbing. All the money came in at one time, but we're just going to focus on what, making sure that in every pair analysis, the pair gets the right proportion. And so as a result, A gets 50 and B gets 75. Let's take a look at now. We'll take a look at A and C. Okay, A and C also it's 125. So A, it only has a claim to the first 100. So A and C split that. A ends up with 50. C has a claim to the entire 125. So A and C split the first 100. So C gets 50 of the first 100, and C is the only claimant to the second 25. So as a result, C gets 75. So that works. And finally, let's take a look at B and C. So B and C, they together have 150. Well, both B and C have a claim to the 100% of that 150 because both of their claims are larger. So they split the entire 150. Okay, and now we take a look at case number 3. We do the same thing. So again, if
this approach assumes you know the final number and you can back into it.
Well, we do know that we know the everybody's given the total.
You're saying compare A and B. They have 150 between them. So if we had 400, how much did they split?
Oh, so let's, what, we can do it. We can we can calculate that because just making sure that I'm that if they had 400, you need to iterate it in order to get to the right number. So I can't do it right off the top of my.
It seems like Rav Yaakov has a formula that gets us to the answer without having to guess and make sure.
Yes. Well, we didn't have a case of 400 in our Mishnah. James was just asking
If
about
you want to split, it'll be 133 each.
133 each. That would be if you split it evenly. Yeah. But A doesn't have a claim to the whole 400. A only has a claim to the first 100 of the 400, and B has a claim just to the first 200. So it's a very complicated as to how we would necessarily work it out.
Logic is snails.
It's not complicated.
Yes, well, we're going to see in a moment an entire different approach that two different.
It's not that complicated, David.
It's not that complicated.
And
a third,
a
133. Yeah, 100%. No, that's if you do it evenly.
Yeah.
But remember, we also have complicated methods. These are more complicated methods of distribution. And when you use one of the more complicated methods of distribution, it isn't as clear as to how it would be. And so again, if you take a look at A and B, right? So 150. So again, the first 100, they both share. And then this last 50, B is going to get all of it. And then if you do A and C, same thing. They have 200 together. So so C is going to get so A is going to get the half of the first 100, and C is going to get the entire overage. So it gets 50 plus 100. So everything again, and then even the 250, right? So B splits the first 200 with C, and then the overage goes to C. And so as a result, all the numbers work under Professor Oman's approach. And so as you can, based on this, it is just a brilliant idea of how this Mishnah was probably originally intended. And again, neither Shmuel nor Rav Yaakov ended up coming up with this approach, but it also, again, it becomes very difficult, as you highlighted, when you have the numbers, in order to confirm that you have the right solution, it's very easy, but it's not so easy to figure out, well, what's the calculation? Well, he gives you, but again, remember his calculation assumes that first we get 75 and then we get 225. Is it always that way? I'm not sure. So, we can try very quickly to see what would happen if it's 400. So let's see what would happen if it was 400. So, in any kind of two-way combination, A should get 50, right? In any two-way combination, B should end up with 100. So I would guess
Be
that it
250.
should be 250. Let's take a look and see if that works.
It is.
I think that that's going to work. So if A and B are combined, that's the exact same thing as over here. So that's fine. If A and C are combined, well, their total is 300. A has a claim to the first 100, so they each get 50, and then C gets the remaining 200. So that's perfect. So and then similarly, if B and C are combined, so then that's a total of 350. So now, well, actually, this is not going to work, right? So because B gets half of the first 200, and then but C should only get maybe 100, and it's not clear that that's the right answer. But
David, you're
so
looking for 400?
what?
David, you're looking
Yep.
for 400?
Yes.
50, 125, 225.
50?
I'm looking at Professor 50,
Oh, you're looking at
125,
Professor Oman's
225.
article?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did not check. Okay, so
That's
let's
why
take a look. So 50, 125, and 225.
That's what you
It's 350.
use Rav Yaakov's method to see if we can get there.
What?
Use Rav
You
Yaakov's.
use Rav Yaakov's method? We'll do that in a moment. All right, so 50 and 125. So this is definitely going to work.
Yeah,
125 and 225.
Yeah.
So that's because what he's doing is he's saying that the overage, right? So this is going to total 350.
Yes,
So
it is.
first, they're going to split the first 200, right? Because that's what B has a claim to. So that gets B 100. Then the C gets the extra 100 that they're entitled to. So that, and now we're left with an extra 50 because there's 350 here. And so the extra 50 is going to once again get split. So they're going to split the first 100. Well, I could split the first 200. 200 they split. Right? Then the next 100 goes to C. And then the last 50 gets split.
Why does the second 100 just go to C?
Because C is the one who has a claim for 300, right? Vita has no claim to that third 100 in this grouping, right? They have a total of 350 together. So B and C both have equal claims to the first 200, but C is the only one who has a claim to the third 100. And so as a result, C gets that entire third 100. And now we have an overage of 50. And so we're just going to split that. Okay. So thank you so much, Andy. Really appreciate your
Sure.
your comment thing, because you don't have to have to say that, right? I mean, you could have a different rule. It would be a very odd
Sure.
rule, I admit,
It is.
to give C the rest of it. But yes, so this makes a lot of sense that we're going to split. So that is Professor Oman's approach.
The question is, why do you almost fit the last 50 among the last two? Oh, because you're only focusing.
Because we're only focusing on the last two. That's exactly right. So, all right. So you
It
should
was
go.
like they cheated. It's
What?
$50.
Yeah, it almost looks like he cheated. Yes, 100%. Okay, so that all gets us ready to now go to the next case. And so we did all of that, so again, here is, I have now on the screen, for those who are watching this, now you can see the Professor Oman's full theory. And so hopefully that is helpful. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to teach a totally different approach altogether. And that really our Mishnah follows one version, one Tana, and another Tana says something completely different.
How much money this time?
Well, let's find out. We have to pay attention. So Tanya, Zo Mishnah's Rebbe Nassan. So really everything, this was all Rebbe Nassan. And Rebbe Omer, I don't agree with Rabbi Nassan at all. Ella cholkos b'shaveh. Rather, you split evenly. Now, split evenly can mean a lot of different things. almost everybody understands this as meaning actually equal. And we will see that, in fact, Shmuel is going to say, in fact, let's read the next line. Amar Shmuel, Shnayim she'etiu lechis, zem mana v'zem matayim. As we turn to Tzadik Gimel on bet, hasachar le'emsa, the profit is divided equally. So basically, excuse me, basically the idea is that according to Rebbe and according to Shmuel, we just divide everything equally. Rabbeinu Hananel does not like this approach at all. He says, no, when we say divide equally, it means that we divide based on the original, the proportion associated with their, with the value of the credit that they're owed, of the value of their claim. And so as a result, you add this together, that totals to 600. A gets 1/6 of everything, B gets 2/6 or 1/3 of everything, and C would get half of everything. And that's how Rabbeinu Hananel explains what it means to be equal. And indeed, actually, Rabbeinu Hananel is, I think, the closest to the way that we actually, in United States law for creditors' rights, apply things. But all right, in any event, okay, so Amar Rabbah. So now Rabbah is going to explain. Mistabra Milsei de Shmuel. I understand when Shmuel makes a lot of sense. Bishor l'charisha ba'omer l'charisha. If James and I were to buy together an ox and market that ox as a plowing ox, well, if I give 200 and James gives 100, we can't, my 2/3 of the ox can't work without James's 1/3. And so as a result, that's where Rabbah is saying Shmuel makes total sense. It makes sense for James and I to split the profits associated with this ox because there's no division. And so as a result, that's where it makes sense. However, if we originally get the ox in order to plow, but in the end, we end up selling the ox for meat, well, then James gets 1/3 of the meat and I get 2/3 of the meat. And that makes a total sense because we're essentially, we're undoing the nature of the asset. Okay, but Rav Hamnuna Amar, no, afilu l'charish va'omer l'tvicha haskar la'emtzit. Whereas Rav Hamnuna says, no, even if in fact we are going to divide the animal based on meat, we should just divide the profits equally. And the way I think about this is that the way it's understood is that we're assuming that James and I did not reach an agreement about how we would divide it. Obviously, if we reached an agreement that I get 2/3 of the profit and James gets 1/3 of the profit, we don't undermine that. But in this case, if we did not reach an agreement, then effectively, even though I gave 2/3 of the amount of the investment and James only gave 1/3, we can treat it as if we both gave half, and the difference is a loan that I've made to James. And so as a result, I've made a loan to James of the difference. And so as a result, we can effectively split the difference. Okay, so Meisvei. So now they asked from a brisa. So meaning we're going to challenge Rabbah's view that limits Shmuel's statement to where the ox was purchased for plowing and actually used for plowing. Two people who put money into a fund, they divide the profits equally. Isn't this talking about where they purchased the ox for plowing and then they used it for slaughtering, meaning that they divided it for meat? Utayuvta de Rabbah, and this is a contradiction to Rabbah. Isn't that the case? So no, that doesn't have to be the case. Low. We can talk about where the ox was purchased for plowing and used for plowing. But if in fact purchased for plowing and used for slaughter, what would be the rule? Zen nota lefi ma'osav, zen nota lefi ma'osav. You want to try and say that each one gets in proportion? Adatani seva, but 1 second. At the end of that brisa that says that they divided equally, what was the case where they divided based on their proportion? It wasn't a case of buying one animal for plowing and then slaughtering it. The case that they teach in order to say that that would be one where you divide based on the size of your investment. Look, lakach zebishalo, mezebishalo, and arbu. That's the case where each one spent their own money buying a number of oxen. So one person paid 200 for their oxen, one paid 100 for their oxen, and now we combine our oxen. In that situation, zen nota lefima usav, zen nota lefima usav. That's where we're going to each take in proportion, because now our asset that James and I are investing is divisible. If it was not divisible, that was where Rabbah says that it's going to be a problem. But now it is divisible. So but 1 second, why did the Brisa need to teach us a case about multiple oxen? We could have taught the case about a single ox. And that when do we say that we split it evenly? It's talking about where the purpose of the ox is not divisible, meaning we have one ox and we're using it for plowing. Why didn't the Brisa specifically refer to the case of an ox bought for plowing but used for slaughter and say that that's one, like Rabbah says, that is divided up based on the one's investment? So Rabbah would answer you, no, Hachinamakamar. Nah, that's really what it's saying. That what is it telling us? That when do we divide equally? It's only where you bought it for plowing and you used it for plowing. But if in fact you were to buy it for plowing and then end up using it for slaughtering, so now it is divisible. It's just like what the Mishnah, what this Brisa is telling us, is that the case of that Rabbah says we divide based on our proportion of our investments is just like if we were to bring in multiple oxen. So each one is going to give to their money. Okay, so 1 second though, what about our Mishnah? Doesn't our Mishnah, the end of our Mishnah, referenced the fact that it said that if 3 people invest in a fund, the losses are divided the way 3 wives divide the assets for their ketubot, which does not involve all 3 getting the same. So doesn't that contradict Shmuel? So it's not. We learned in our Mishnah, if there's a loss or a profit, they divide it just as we saw with cases 1, 2, and 3. And here, yes, in case 1, they all divide equally, but in case 2 and 3, they don't. So as a result, it's not a simple division, equal division. So as a result, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. So Shmuel would have to create an akimta in the Mishnah that the Mishnah is not in fact talking about a true profit or a true loss, but rather Hosiru Zuze Chadte. That again, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, lo Hosiru Zuze Chadte Pakatu Astira de Tunisa. That what we're talking about is either where the original coins were changed into new coins, but really there's no material difference, and so as a result, we're just going to take back what we put in, and so that's the profit. The profit is just that the newer coins are more exchangeable, more readily accepted, or that the loss is that the coins have effectively been devalued. And so as a result, they're only worth whatever they can be used are as slabs of metal. And so as a result, that's going to be the explanation. And so again, we end up with Shmuel. So we now had several different approaches. We had our whole Mishnah approach with the various version of Shmuel and Rav Yaakov. We had the approach of Shmuel separate from, we had the approach of Rebbe, separate from our Mishnah, who says just divide everything equally. And indeed, that's what Shmuel says is in fact the right answer. Again, not trying to explain our Mishnah. And then finally, we had Rabbeinu Hananel within Rebbe, who says that actually you sum everything up, you divide by that, you take each person according to their proportion, and that's how we divide it. So we've come up with 3 different approaches to how one divides the assets. So let's do the next Mishnah, and then with that we'll conclude for the week. So Misha Hayanasu Arba Nashim. You have somebody who married 4 wives. Okay, Umeis Harishona Kodemis Lishnia Vishnia Lishlishas Ushlishas Laravias Rishona Nishbas Lishnia Ushlishas Ravias. So we have first, the question is one of priority. The first wife takes precedence over the second takes over the third takes over the fourth. Basically, you get the money in the order in which you were married. Okay. Assuming that the Ketubot date it matches the marriage date. All right, and now what else? Rishona nishbas l'shnia, shnia l'shlishas u'shlishas l'revias, v'arevias nifras below shvua. The first wife has to swear to the second wife, namely that she has not already collected her ksuba. The second wife swears to the third wife that she has not collected her ksuba, and the third wife swears to the fourth wife that she has not collected her ksuba. The fourth wife doesn't have to swear to anyone. But benanas omer v'chim ipnei shehi achrona niskeres. Avi loti parav ela b'shvua. No, even the fourth wife has to swear, and we're going to discuss tomorrow, God willing, what that machlokus is between the Tanakama and Benanas. Hayu yotzos kulam b'yomech. What happens if all 4 were married on the same? All 4 ksubas were written on the same day. Kol hakodemis lechaverta afilu shah achas zachta. As long as one was before the other, if it was an hour earlier, that's totally fine. In fact, in Yerushalayim, they would record the hours in there when they sign. So hayakul and yotzim b'shah achas. But if they were all written in the same hour, so the ein sham elamana, and there's only 100, so then cholkos b'shava, everybody divides equally. All right, and so with that, again, tomorrow, God willing, we'll pick up. Actually, I'll just note, Tosfos wonders, why is it that our Mishnah references 4 wives? We could have had the same law with just 2. And Tosfos says that the Mishnah teaches us an important lesson, that once one person is forced to swear by one person, that oath works vis-a-vis everyone else. And so as a result, if person number 1 is forced to swear for person number 2, person number 3 can't say, I want you to swear also for me. That's Tosfos' second half of his question. And because if we had 3 people, according to the first Tanakama opinion in our Mishnah, the third person never would have to swear. So maybe it's only because the third person doesn't have to swear that the third person doesn't have the ability to force the first person to make a separate oath. And so as a result, we have 4 people. The third person is going to have to swear, and yet that third person lacks the ability to force the first person to make a second oath. And so as a result, that is why we need 4 people to teach us this lesson. So that is the Tosfos at the bottom of the page. And with that, I will wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And thank you so much, Andy, for joining us and for participating.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick question on the last Gemara? You mentioned the 4 or 5 different approaches. Do we have a way that the halacha paskins?
Yes.
You mentioned the 4 or 5 different approaches in the previous Gemara. Do we know how the halacha particularly paskins? You mentioned also that U.S. law would follow the whichever investment comes in. Would we paskin that way?
That's an excellent question. I will have to get back to you on that because I'm not 100% sure how we paskin. Let me do some research and I will get back to you. I'll send an email to the WhatsApp group because I know that you're on that. All right.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
15? Oh, wow.